Hi everyone, and welcome to Exploring the Build. If you just found this place, then welcome. And if you're returning, I'm glad to have you back. I'm Alex, and this is my channel where we explore and theory craft different character builds for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. Today, we're doing a quick build. We'll be exploring a summarized character build for Dungeons & Dragons 5e, and as always with quick builds, let me know in the comments below if there are any character builds you'd like to see me explore in the future. Today, we are building around the concept of a Sentinel of Nature. Now, that can mean a lot of different things, but for us, it means that we're going to be building a ranger today. Thematically, we are a character that has grown up in nature, far from civilization, and they now stand ever vigilant in its defense. Sounds like a typical ranger, but we'll get to the tricks in a second. Mechanically, we're going to be a martial character that isn't necessarily frontline, but is certainly melee-oriented. They can exert a lot of control over the battlefield and can dish out a reasonable amount of damage as well. By the end of the build, we're going to be a very unique take on the whole melee fighter idea, and we'll hopefully have some tricks up our sleeves for both inside and outside of combat. If you want a character that can exert a lot of control over at least a specific portion of the battlefield, even though they're a martial character, or if you just want to see how our theme and mechanics of being a sentinel sort of tie together, then come along for the journey as we explore the build. Starting in character creation, we're going to pick Bugbear as our lineage. A bugbear is a big, nasty goblinoid creature and is actually a monstrous race, so check with your DM if it's okay to use it, but they are technically part of official rules, so hopefully we'll be allowed to. The Durgar lineage also kind of works for this build, but we'll get to why I'm going with Bugbear instead of Durgar in a minute or two. For our stats, the +2 to strength and the +1 to dexterity from Bugbear is actually fine, so we'll just leave that as is. You can change those around if you'd like, but there's really no need to. After we use point buy, we're going to want to end up with the following ability scores no matter what. We want 16 strength, 14 dexterity, 14 constitution, 8 intelligence, 14 wisdom, and 9 charisma. So jumping into the actual level breakdown of the build now, we're going to just look at the first 4 levels to start with, and we're only taking Ranger for those. We have a lot of choices here, like whether to use the optional features from Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, or just the basic features from Player's Handbook for Ranger itself. We have to choose what spells to take, what fighting style, what subclass, and of course what to do with our ability score improvement / feat. Let's break it down nice and simple. For base Ranger features versus optional ones, that's up to you. Both can be thematically appropriate, and neither one gives us anything that we really need, so choose your favorite. For spells, we want to make sure that we get Hunter's Mark and Long Strider. Anything else, though, completely up to you. For our fighting style, we're going to actually want to take Druidic Warrior here. We don't need any of the others, though you can choose them if you want. Druidic Warrior, however, gives us access to both the Thorn Whip and Guidance cantrips, which we actually kind of want. Guidance is just a nice little skill buff that can be really great outside of combat. Thorn Whip is going to be important later, and I'll get to that eventually. For our ability score improvement / feat, we're going to take Polearm Master. Make sure that you have a glaive, pike, or halberd by this point, which is level 4. We'll probably be able to actually start with one of those anyways, so we should be okay for that, but just make sure you have it. And finally, for our subclass, we are diving into the depths of Unearthed Arcana to pick up the Primeval Guardian Ranger. Now technically, this subclass was reworked into the Guardian of Nature spell that both druids and rangers get access to, but the subclass is still unique enough that if it's okay with our DM, we definitely want to use it because we can do some pretty neat things with it. If you're not okay with using Unearthed Arcana or your DM doesn't allow it, then the build's going to change a little bit since this is kind of entirely what we're basing our build around, but you could still get away with some other options like Rune Knight instead of going down Ranger at all, or any other ways that you can sort of enlarge yourself. So here's where our build comes to life, and if you've been paying attention to the fact that we are a Bugbear and what features they get, plus the fact that we wanted Polearm Master and a polearm of some type to use, I think you'll know where I'm going with this. Essentially, the Primeval Guardian subclass gives us a few cool features like extra once per turn, we can deal 1d6 piercing damage on all of our attacks. That's pretty nice. We also gain some extra spells that are specific to the Primeval Guardian. That's also really cool. But the main feature is Guardian Soul. As a bonus action, this feature lets us become large, our reach increases by 5 feet, and we gain a few temporary hit points at the start of each of our turns. Now the kicker about this feature is that it has no restrictions on how long it stays up or how many times you can use it. The only restriction is that all of our speeds drop to 5 feet, but we can deal with that later. Now this means that if we want, we can just permanently play as a large character, which that actually sounds pretty fun on its own, but that's for another day. The benefits that we get while large are also amazing. For example, because the temporary HP triggers at the start of all of our turns, this is actually more like flat damage reduction, which makes us a fair bit tankier than your average bugbear. Which, speaking of, as bugbear, we innately have a 10-foot reach. Normal creatures can reach 5 feet with a melee weapon, bugbears have an extra 5 so they can reach 10, and with a polearm that we pick up, that actually becomes 15 feet. With our large feature up, that reach increases to a total of 20 feet. Plus, since we're also large, we technically gain an extra 5 feet of reach from that option as well, depending on how you actually look at the grid, really. But this means that even though we're a melee character, we can now hit enemies that are effectively 25 feet away from where we were when we were just a medium creature. So what's the drawback to all this? Well, as long as we are large, our speed is only ever 5 feet, like I said, so we aren't particularly mobile. As long as we're in the middle of the battlefield, we can attack anything within 20 feet of us, though, which means that we have a very large area of control. Plus, we also picked up Thornwhip, which gives us this fun combo. Thornwhip has a range of 30 feet. If an enemy is 30 feet away from it, we can use Thornwhip, and assuming they fail their save, they will be pulled 10 feet towards us, which is actually now 20 feet away from us, which is when our reach starts. And we have Polearm Master, meaning that unless your DM says otherwise, or you're playing where the rules about forced movement don't trigger opportunity attacks, technically, based on how the Polearm Master feat is written, as long as an enemy enters our reach, doesn't matter how they do it, we can use the reaction from Polearm Master to make an opportunity attack on that enemy. So we can just Thornwhip them over to us and bat them away. So now I want to talk about why Bugbear and not Durgar. Well, let me use a visual example here. You can see that even though Durgar do have access to the Enlarge Reduce spell, they miss out on the bonus 5 feet reach from Bugbear, and Enlarge doesn't actually give you extra reach. This means that their effective reach is pretty much the same as ours, if not a little smaller. They would be size huge, which yes is the same size as a giant, which is awesome, but they'd only have a reach of 15 feet away from them. We're size large, but we still have a reach of 20 feet, so we're rivaling, if not beating, their effective area of control. Plus, the Durgar Enlarge Reduce ability to become size huge is a spell that still requires concentration, and it only lasts a minute. Whereas for us, we can just become big, stay big permanently, and constantly have access to that reach. And then we can also cast Hunter's Mark and use that for our concentration, but still have a little more damage for specific enemies. So now that we know what our build is about, and that we've actually achieved it already, what now? Well, that's actually a good question. For levels 5 to 10, we'll just go up Fighter. This gives us another fighting style, a subclass, and 2 ability score improvements / feats. We also gain Action Surge, but that's just a bonus, not really a choice, so we won't worry about that. Our fighting style, we take Great Weapon Fighter, gives a small increase to our average damage, given that we can just re-roll a 1 or a 2. For our ASI / feats, we're going to increase our strength by 2 at Fighter 4, and then just choose between the Sentinel feat or a +2 increase to Wisdom to improve our Thornwhip. For us, I will take Sentinel to make us an actual Forest Guardian, or Tree Sentinel, some might call us. For our subclass, there are plenty of good options, but we just want more range and battlefield control. We're going to take Battle Master here and pick up the following maneuvers: Lunging Attack and Brace. Anything else that we would get as a maneuver, totally up to you. With Lunging Attack, we can now reach up to 25 feet on at least some of our attacks. And with Brace, we now have a lot more control over who's moving around in our area of control. Before, even with Sentinel, it was mainly about stopping enemies from moving into or out of our reach. But now with Brace, even enemies that move while they're in our reach, potentially going to get attacked by us, we can really have a lot of control over who's doing what within the area around us. It's really awesome to see on a martial character, to be honest. After picking up those features, it's now time to decide what our last 10 levels are going to be. If you want more battlefield control and a bit more support options, and also to be a bit more thematic to our Forest Guardian theme, then I would actually recommend going back to Ranger, just sticking there, and actually not taking that extra level in Fighter. If we can go up to 15 level Ranger and then Fighter 5, or even 16 Ranger and Fighter 4 for an extra ASI/feat from Ranger 16, we'd gain a lot more defensive and supportive features. We gain extra features like Ancient Fortitude and Rooted Defense. Ancient Fortitude makes us a lot more durable, while Rooted Defense turns the ground within 30 feet of us into difficult terrain. And lucky for us, our reach covers most of that radius already, which means any enemy that even wants to try to hit us is going to have to go through difficult terrain and get attacked the entire time they're making their way over to us. Also, the temporary hit points that we get from Guardian Soul would go up too. And at Ranger 16, they would actually be, since they're only half our Ranger level, 8 temporary hit points, which admittedly isn't much, but that's at the start of our turn, every turn. And so if we did a full minute of combat, that's, 8 temporary hit points times 10 rounds of a generic minute of combat. That's 80 extra health on top of whatever we're normally going to end up with. And again, since the large feature is just permanent, that could be a lot more than just 80 health. So just keep that in mind. Finally, at Ranger 15, we would get the Guardian Aura feature from our Primeval Guardian subclass. And this ability is really nice. It says that any ally that is below half health that starts their turn inside our aura heals a number of hit points equal to half our Ranger level. If we were a full Ranger 16, that would be 8 hit points just at the start of their turn. In combat, that's a nice top-up. But out of combat, that is almost as busted as Healing Spirit. If you want more offensive options, though, then you'll do what we're going to say we're doing with this theory-crafted build, and that is go back to Fighter for most of the build. We can still jump to Ranger 8 to pick up Ancient Fortitude, as well as an ASI/feat, but Fighter 11 is really what we want, and that gets us 3 attacks, which makes us a lot more dangerous offensively. For the sake of time, let me say this. You can pick your favorites for any new maneuvers, like I had said before, and for our ASIs/feats, we're going to gain 3 more for 6 ASI/feats total. For these last 3 that we get, we're going to increase our wisdom, so Thornwhip works a bit better. We're going to boost our durability with either a +2 to con or just taking the tough feat. And then we're going to choose to either cap our strength at 20 or increase our wisdom to 18. Personally, I like boosting wisdom, so I'll say we do that, but you could choose whatever you feel is right. With all that said, let's see what we have. No matter how you built this character, whether you went more defensively and Ranger-focused or offensively and Fighter-focused, we are a legitimate Sentinel. When we are in Guardian form, we have a reach of 20 feet, and we can extend that to 25 feet. Plus we're large, and we still have a 5-foot move speed, meaning we can easily attack enemies that are roughly 35 feet away. We can attack 3 times, plus with Polearm Master we have a bonus action attack that deals a d4 instead of a d10, but it's still just an extra attack. Plus we have a very reliable reaction that we can either use Brace, Sentinel, or Polearm Master with. Assuming we get all those attacks, that would be like making 5 attacks in any given round. We would be able to deal 4d10 plus 1d4 plus 5d6, assuming we're hitting the same target that has Hunter's Mark on them, plus a d6 from Piercing Thorns, plus 20 from our modifier. Without calculating for the reroll, that makes up 66 damage per round on average. That's also without Great Weapon Master, which you also could have technically tried to take at some point, and that's also without including Action Surge to do even more damage. That's really not shabby for just 66 damage per round each round of combat. So we also have some good durability. At the start of each of our turns, we, because I'm more fighter focused, only gain 4 temporary hit points. But like I said, that's going to add up the longer combat goes on. We also have an extra 16 hit points as long as we're large from our Ancient Fortitude feature. And assuming we have a 16 Constitution, which I assume that we do based on what our ability scores ended up with, we have a total of 184 hit points on average. That gives us a grand total of 200 hit points on the dot, with 4 temporary hit points that regenerate every single round. The only bad thing is the 5-foot move speed that we're stuck with while in large form. But there are a few ways around that, which I've saved till the end here. Option A, we could only grow large in combat once we're in position. It's just a bonus action to use to actually activate our Guardian Soul feature, so there's no harm in doing that, and that's the way the feature was really intended to be used. Option B is you can ask your DM if increasing your speed after you're large is a viable option. There's no rule against it. It doesn't say that your speed can never benefit from anything else. It just says that after you become large, your speed goes to 5. Option C would be to try and pick up a teleport spell like Misty Step or some other feature that's similar. This would use a lot of our resources, but it would be a nice way to just blip around the battlefield and plop ourselves down anywhere we need to be to then exert our large area of control just in the blink of an eye. Finally, option D, we would just need to find a mount. It would need to be a size larger than us, which would be huge since we are large, but assuming you could find like an elephant or something, which is a standard mount according to the player's handbook even, then we could just use our Guardian Soul to permanently be large, hop on our mount, and use their mobility instead of ours in and out of combat. Overall, we're a very powerful martial controller creature, and we can certainly defend not only our allies, but of course, the very forest itself. Let me know what you thought of our quick build today, and how you would change it to build more around the concept of this Forest Guardian or Nature Sentinel. Thank you so much for joining me on the journey, and I hope to see you in the next one.